Hello, everyone. Anyway, as people get in the room, hey, good to see you, Scott. You made it. Yay. I think my face has changed since the last shift. I've got more of this. It's like I could do without that. This might help. Oh, you're too good to me. I'm gonna be talking about something. Hey, Data. I'm not gonna call you Junkie, okay? Just call you Data. Um, Hi, Paul. Well, I make allowances for the youngins. They need to hobnob with us old folks once in a while with our wisdom and all that. um, I want to read a little excerpt out of a book I'm reading. Um, it's called. I wrote it down. Exploring Our Parallel Worlds, Part 2, by Richard Bullivant. Now, he's written a lot of good stuff, interesting stuff. And it's got all kinds of stuff in it. And this little part is about the Windigo. Now, I don't know if you are aware of this particular cryptid or myth or legend or whatever you want to call it. It's a Native American belief, like skinwalkers, which is a different story. We'll talk about them sometime. Yeah, Scott's really tolerant of us old folks. Just ask UK Gadget Man. You never heard of the Windigo? Well, it's in the north. It's in part of Canada or on top part of the United States. And I'll read to you about it. It'll tell you what they are. And they're associated with cannibalism, actually. And so I will start reading. The reason I got this because it had an interesting twist to it. Thank you, Scott. I'm glad you don't want to put me away right away now. Windigo. It's Wendigo. A projection from another dimension, ? Sorry, my glasses reflect so much. I'm going to try to get some reading glasses that don't reflect so much, so it doesn't do that with the window. Even more frightening than Bigfoot is another eerie monster of the American and Canadian wilderness, known as the Windigo. Often associated with or mistaken for a species of Bigfoot. A close examination of the documented sightings of this creature show that it is an entity that literally, if I can speak, literally defies categorization. Doesn't fit with other cryptid kind of things. It's really different. It's just plain weird. Extremely weird. In fact, the parallel universe connection with the Windigo is even more pronounced, more complicated, and strange. But if the Windigo truly exists, then a parallel universe scenario may be the only way to make sense of this bizarre apparition. The last well-documented sighting of Windigo occurred in northern Minnesota. Up there in Minnesota. In a small town of Rousseau, and was reported in a brief blurb by the town's newspaper, the Rousseau Times-Region. The year was 1940. Now, I don't know if there's any more documented. I think that there are, but this is the one that was actually reported and in the paper, which doesn't happen very often anymore. A housewife at home with her 2 children called the police and reported a strange creature or monster in her yard. She believed it to be the legendary Windigo. But how did this woman know specifically that this was the Windigo? Why not Bigfoot or some other common monster? That's supposed to be 2 quotes. I have to hold the book or the Kindle. But the fact is, as late as 1940, many people in that area, were still well versed in the particulars of the Windigo legend. It was understood to be an entirely different apparition from Sasquatch. Indeed, the appearance of the creature had a long history of being sighted in this rather sparsely populated corner of northwest Minnesota. Please don't hate me for making fun of you, Minnesotans. You're wonderful. Although large and hairy like Bigfoot and about 8 to 15 feet tall. I mean, you're not going to miss that one, are you? You know, most of our ceilings are like, 8 to 9 feet tall. Think about that's pretty big. The identifying attributes of the Windigo veer off sharply from there. So, except for size, not quite Bigfoot. The creature is at times reported to have a large set of antlers. Now, that's a different one, isn't it? It's kind of like Baphomet, has antlers. And some of the other pagan gods and whatnot from way back have horns and antlers. It's kind of different. Has a set of antlers like an elk, which are quite massive if you've ever seen elk antlers. Most sightings report that the creature's rib cage can be seen bulging just beneath the skin of its thorax. So it's really skinny. The head is elongated and the beast is fitted with a row of sharp fangs. It's got to be terrifying to see something like that. Hi, Creek. I don't know. We're going to find out. I have to see. I thought that was, I don't know. There's a lot. Its head was elongated, fitted with big teeth, lots of sharp fangs, claws, and had large feet that had big claws on them, or talons. Fingers were bony, also with heavy claws. So it's like, that would be terrifying to see this creature. And now the strangest aspect of the Windigo sightings. The creature is often reported to be clothed, usually in white, silky, lacy material, sometimes rags or even a robe. Now that's weird. It's wearing a white robe. Most cryptids do not wear, druid outfits or whatever. At times, the beast wears tattered animal skins. In many cases, a Windigo is said to display a star in the middle of the forehead. Makes me think that ancient peoples have traveled and brought some of their beliefs to the Americas, and that we really don't know the real history of anywhere. They may have had some kind of influence, I was thinking, of another culture. That's kind of weird. A monster wearing strange clothing in the woods is probably just too much for even the most open-minded person to give credence to, and so the Wendigo is far more likely to be written off as a myth. Not something that would reasonably be considered to be an actual species of some undocumented animal. Bigfoot is easier to accept as possibly being real because it bears a close resemblance to an animal we relate to, the great ape. The Wendigo, on the other hand, would appear to defy all comparisons. Now they're going to talk about ancient history on this thing. Yeah, I said it on that. Does it bother you? Do you want me to change it? Supposed to be party. My hair's still a little wet. That's why I look a little unkempt. An ancient history. When the first white settlers began to move into the northwest Minnesota in the 1870s and 1880s, they quickly learned of the legend of the Wendigo from the Native American tribes that inhabited the region for thousands of years. The European pioneers dismissed the tales of the Wendigo as Indian superstitions. Now, northwest Minnesota is dominated by the Chippewa and or Ojibwe, which are among the Algonquin-speaking tribes that populate Canada and some of the border regions of Minnesota and Canada. Historians, anthropologists, and folklorists tell us that the legend of the Wendigo has been a facet of what they call Algonquin mythology for uncounted centuries. For the Algonquin, the Wendigo is an apparition associated with cannibalism. Not only does the Wendigo itself crave the taste of human flesh, but the indigenous people say that the Wendigo sightings occur when human beings fall into a practice of cannibalism in times of scarce food and starvation. The most debased of human behavior is said to bring out or arouse the Wendigo as punishment or warning against man eating the flesh of other human beings. Pretty much a taboo all over the world, except in a few places. All well and good, except that the historical records from about 1880 through 1820, it should be the other way around, 1820 to 1880, or it's supposed to be 1920, I don't know. In Russo County, Minnesota, are peppered with reports of encounters with the Wendigo creature. Such reports being made by the white settlers who just moved into the area, not superstitious Indians. That's in quotes too, superstitious Indians. Among the first white settlers in the northern portion of Minnesota, Russo County, was Jacob Nelson, who upon arriving in the late 1880s found the area was already inhabited by a small Indian village of about 40 permanent inhabitants. Nelson and later his son Jesse became familiar with the friendly and sociable Indians. Nelsons were quickly made familiar with the stories and the legends of Native culture, including the legend of the Wendigo. To these indigenous people, the Wendigo was not a myth, but a much dreaded creature that was very real. Even so, Jacob Nelson assumed the Wendigo was just another article of Native American storytelling. That is, until one day in 1904, when his son and daughter experienced a harrowing encounter in a forested area with the monster itself. The record of their encounter is on file in records held by the Russo County Historical Society. Young Jesse Nelson and his sister Edna were hiking in the Minnesota woods on a fine spring day. Two kids were having a carefree romp in lovely weather. Written by Britt. I don't think we would say romp here for that, but yeah. I'm sure they were just walking around. Enjoying the return of warmth after a long, bitterly cold winter, suddenly Edna screamed. Jessie turned and saw, and this is in quotes, a giant creature about 15 feet tall, wearing white robes with a star etched into its forehead. I mean, who would come up with that one? Intensely afraid, they ran home and later told the teacher of their one-room schoolhouse all about the inexplicable creature they had both witnessed in the woods. A day later, a healthy young Indian brave of the Indian village died for unknown reasons. The Native Americans were not surprised. They knew that whenever the Windigo appeared, someone would die. Kind of like their version of, the Irish banshee, I guess, in a way. Interesting. Jessie Nelson would see the creature again about a month later. Another mysterious death quickly followed. Near the town of Rousseau, today's population is about 2,000, so it's a small town, medium small. Another tiny village called Ross. At the turn of the century, Ross was a thriving, though small settlement, which also featured a nearby cluster of Native American people who had inhabited this region for centuries. The vicinity around Ross has dozens of recorded sightings of the Windigo, both by the Indians and the white people who live there. Sightings are sometimes mentioned in local newspapers and records at the local historical society. Incidentally, the city of Ross essentially no longer exists. I mean, if you have that many Windigos, I'd move out too. All that remains is a small township house and a few homes and scattered farms. It's an area of woods, prairie, and open farm fields. Probably pretty. Cold in the winter, though. It's really cold up there. Now, the peculiar aspects of the Windigo sightings, there's some really strange things that how this thing appears to people. He says, if our story is not strange enough already, here's where things get even stranger. Throughout history, occasional mention is made in connection with Windigo sightings that are not associated in any other reports of bizarre cryptids. The case of the Windigo sightings by both Indian and white settlers mention that. I'd prefer to say Native Americans or First People or whatever, but I'm reading from here, so I'm just using his wordage. Quote, the creature can appear to be rendered flat or make itself flat when looked at from the side. Now, what does that make you think of when something is two-dimensional instead of three? In many reports, those who have encountered the Windigo have said, if it turns its side to you, it almost disappears into a thin line. Almost reminds me of the slit experiment, a little bit. It's like you'll see things out of the corner of your eyes, but you look in that direction and there's nothing there. It's because when you look straight at it, it changes from a particle to a wave and can't be seen or something like that. That's what I think. I mean, I don't know. Hey, Claire. Good to see you. Anyway, the Windigo. If it turns its side to you, it almost disappears into a thin line. Now, that's bizarre. That's bizarre. Others have said the Windigo can become flat like a sheet of paper. And Indian tales say that the Windigo can become thinner than a sliver of grass. To first take note of this unique peculiarity of Windigo sightings was a longtime northern Minnesota journalist, Ken Korzak, who published a 3-part series on the Windigo on the online news site examiner.com. And he basically, I'm just going to paraphrase this so we can get through it. He said the flat aspect of the Windigo seems like a sci-fi element or something very modern or technological. And, so he says, I've been interested and followed theories of physics, astronomy, cosmology, and other hard sciences. I have recently read books such as The Holographic Universe by Michael Talbot, which I'm going to have to get because I'm fascinated, including that by NASA physicist Thomas Campbell, who in his trilogy of books, My Big Toe, Theory of Everything, Campbell makes a compelling argument that we actually live in a virtual reality. Where have we heard that? That is being projected from another source. I couldn't help but match this up when I was doing my research about the Windigo. The idea we were living in a projected reality made Korczak think that perhaps an explanation for the Windigo is that it too is a projection, which might account for the unusual reports of its flatness, as if projected on a screen. Now this is where you're going to freak out just a little bit, and a little out there. Hard science supports a flat universe. Take that, flat earthers. I one-upped you one. Not just a flat earth, it's a flat universe. Hi, Mice Guy, 5D. Hi, GPK. Glad to see you. And the funny thing is that it's not a new or radical idea, a flat universe. The flat universe scenario is still very much in play amongst today's cosmologists. It was actually suggested early on by Russian mathematician Alexander Friedman in 1922. That's a long time ago. When he came out with what are appropriately called the Friedman equations. Friedman derived his work from Albert Einstein's field questions on gravitation. The conclusion leads us to that the universe is flat and everything we see and observe around us is projected onto a screen, much like we see a movie or TV images on a flat surface. The flat universe scenario supported by the Friedman equations gives credence to the holographic principle, which also suggests that our universe is flat and that all human beings and therefore possible non-human entities are projected from another source. Take that, flat earthers. Try to outdo that one. Oh my goodness. According to a study published in the Physical Review Letters, the holographic principle suggests the entire universe can be seen as a two-dimensional information structure painted on the cosmological horizons, such that the three dimensions we observe are only an effective description of macroscopic scales and at low energies. Now, I don't know what that means. What sciencey stuff, and it's even more sciencey than I'm used to. So, the universe we live in is a flat projection on a screen. That's what. Okay, now finally, both Friedman and de Sitter, who was another guy that got into it, found support in actual observational data by space probes, most notably the Wilkinson Microwave Anisotropy probe launched by NASA, oh, that evil word, in 2001. The Wilkinson probe made a complete survey of the cosmic microwave background radiation left over by the Big Bang. To make the long story short, these measurements that they took show that the universe is flat. It doesn't mean things don't appear real to us. Because if you ever saw a thing about if a 3D person goes into a 2D world, you wouldn't be able to comprehend. I mean, it's very hard to. Our 2D person goes into a 3D world. I mean, the world they're in makes sense to them. So that might be why we don't really notice it. I'm going to skip a little bit here. Hey, Cupie. Now here's another step here. You know, the Windigo's peculiar qualities. It wears a robe of lace. It bears a star on its forehead. What kind of monster is that? Okay, now there's the thing. It's called the remote viewing angle. This goes all over the place. We know that U.S. Army intelligence and CIA were beginning in the early 70s to do this remote viewing because the Russians were doing it. The purpose of the remote viewing program was to spy on the Soviet Union to gather Cold War intelligence. But once these elite corps of psychic spies, that's in quotes, developed their skills to a high level, it was inevitable they would start to wonder about other kinds of issues, like what are UFOs? Is there life after death? Are there really ghosts? Yada, yada. One of the most famous ones we hear about, decorated military officer Major Ed Dames, was among a small number of men who served as primary facilitator for the best and original corps of remote viewers. Now, remote viewing is when you've trained your brain to your consciousness to go somewhere else and look at something. And just about anybody can learn how to do it. And it's been pretty substantiated and proven that it can be done. So we'll talk about remote viewing some other time in more depth. Anyway, Dames managed the sessions which reviewers would cast out their minds to review information about distant locations. Could have been anywhere on the planet or anywhere in the universe. So after it was declassified, he teaches people how to do this. Okay, he decided in 2013 that they would look into Bigfoot to see what Bigfoot was. And when the Dames team projected their minds in the quest to flesh out the facts about Bigfoot, the answers that came back were almost too difficult for them to believe. And maybe too difficult for us to believe, too. But this group had already experienced a pretty strange thing. I had that book, too. It may still be in my garage somewhere. Or maybe in Scott's attic. I don't know. He's got a lot of stuff up there. So they've experienced a lot of stuff, and you get to the point where, oh, okay, that's weird, but, I get it. The information they were getting was that Bigfoot was a kind of projection. And I just like going, well, there's physical evidence here that it's around. I mean, footprints and broken trees and rocks being thrown. And I'm trying to figure out, but then we may underestimate the degree of technology involved in that. Excuse me. Not used to talking so much at one time. I know Scott would disagree. Hi, Tammy. To the surface of the Earth from a parallel universe, and that the effort was being directed from a location in outer space, in the flat universe somewhere. Projected image sounds familiar? They detected a kind of long rectilinear device positioned in space. He said the object appeared to be a projector-assembler, which used carbon and other basic elements out of the atmosphere to generate something that looked like Bigfoot. So I guess that would have a kind of physicality then. I mean, if you think that everything's a projection, then we who are here would see it as real. And Dames went on to say that the device was connected to a group of entities, in quotes, who were even further out in space. excuse me, but who may also have been transdimensional beings. And his team was unable to discern the nature of these entities, whether they were aliens or spiritual beings, but they had encountered them before. Dames called them the controllers. But if you think about it, if it's projection, it's kind of funny because it says, the Bigfoot's never been, the Bigfoot's has never been perceived as a flat thing like the Windigo. But Bigfoot has been a creature that simply vanished in a ball of light or just into nowhere. It'll just disappear. For centuries, the idea that the Windigo had the ability to appear flat, levitate, and double its image seemed simply fantastic, magical, and almost imaginary, but we don't know. If you think about our technology and the stuff we can make look real, that if there's something with greater technology, can totally make it believable to us. So, what do you think of that? Flat universe. So this Windigo appears like a sheet of paper or a blade of grass. Now, I've also read some legends where the Windigo possesses people. And there's been stories of a man who wandered into his village and everybody was dead. Apparently he thought someone else had killed him, but he had transformed into a Windigo and had killed everybody. There's been also movies and stuff which shows it as a man turning into one. So I'm not usually sure about some of these things, but I think that the shows I've watched have taken some artistic license. But that was also a Canadian story of the man that was a lone survivor in this village, and they figured he had possession of a Windigo that had turned him into a cannibal and killed everybody. So I guess cultures have their ways of explaining what they see, and they don't usually. Well, yeah, maybe Dames just saw an agent affecting his own. We don't know. You have to keep an open mind, not just, this is what they found. I don't know. But the Windigo is a terrifyingly strange creature. And the thing that it has white robes and a star on its forehead almost sounds alien to me, or like something out of Europe, really, or England. Antlers and stuff, like some kind of deity. Yeah, you have to understand that I was referring to sometimes affecting his own psyche. I have a friend that lives in Sedona, and he wanted me to remote view and look at what he was holding in his hand and looking at. And I was very good at describing it, and he was impressed with that, but he said, "You're cheating." I said, "What? I'm cheating? I know what you're looking at and holding, but I'm cheating." He says, "You're looking through my eyes." I was using telepathy instead of remote viewing, so I was cheating. It's like, okay, if you say so. Orbs. Oh, orbs are interesting. I'll have to do one. I have some pictures. I have one that's in my backyard that's really huge. It looks like it's about this big, and it's projecting its own light. It's like glowing bright, but was not visible to the eye. It was in the evening, and there were, the usual moisture orbs that you see. There were some of those, but this I had asked it to prove, so I could prove that this, I think it's an elemental in the backyard, was really there, and that I'd like to take its picture. And there it was. My daughter was totally freaked out. She won't go in the backyard without company, and she prefers not to go at all. And orbs. I think there's certain ones that are actual energy moving around, and then there's some that's just dust or moisture. And I think you can tell, because if it's moving independently and different and changes direction, or emanates its own light, or has interesting colors to it or textures, I think you have to think that those might be something more than just dust or moisture. And especially if they appear in unusual places. I like to see the misty stuff in graveyards. You see those. Now I think that's definitely some kind of energy manifesting when it has that, misty stuff that just like near a gravestone or something. That's freaky. So, yeah, and I think that maybe what's, if this is a simulated reality and it's done by incredibly high-tech someone's controllers, and that's a horrible thought if you think about it, the controllers, well, they're not controlling some of us horribly well, are they? I wonder if, it concerns me sometimes of to what lengths would they try to fix the problem. If they can, we may be unfixable. Yeah, orbs are like tiny windows for spirit souls to peek here. I don't know. I think that, when they say that there's all these dimensions and they're all just really close to each other, and that there are thin spots. You'll hear psychics say, oh, this is a lot of things manifest because the barrier between this world and the next is very thin, very unstable. And, so any theories you have, a lot of them are quite possible. We don't really know hardly anything. We'll know about changes that we notice in our bodies and our world. And I think because of that, and because we can see outside the program a little bit, I don't know if that makes us considered to be dangerous or annoying to the to the program. I know we're annoying to the world. People we talk to get really unhappy with us sometimes. Oh, you guys are, they'll get, they will really get angry. Some of them, they really get wound up. When you talk about, things like this, that this world is not what you think it is. I don't know. I've had flu shots, and I've had all my shots, and I still woke up. So all my kids have their shots, and I know a few of them are waking up. I don't really think that has anything to do with it. I don't think anything they can do to our bodies is going to change anything, because it's not about our body. They can't change our consciousness, even if they mess with our bodies. I don't think they can. We're powerful. They only can if we believe they can. Really, we're so powerful as a spiritual being that and I really believe that. I think we're very powerful in that we're not so much victims as we are travelers in the matrix kind of thing. And nothing this world can do to us is going to stop us from seeing things and being aware of things. No. And that perhaps is why the efforts have been futile. There's nothing that can get to us, not really. They can try. They can try. That is not. And it's a funny thing is that we're not really dangerous. I mean, I don't know, in the sense of as people in the world we live in, we're not dangerous. But maybe we're dangerous if too many people start being aware that things will start to break down. Because the collective consciousness is what makes the world. And if enough people think a different way, the world will change. Our reality, what we call reality, will change if enough people have certain beliefs. And that's why, it's a good thing to be as positive of a thinker as you can be. And that's hard, especially when we get roughed about so much by life. And it's hard, but it's a good ambition to try to be more positive and try to do something you really enjoy once in a while. Get offline and go outside and get your feet in the mud or something. I mean, play with a pet. Read something you've always wanted to read. Do something creative. It doesn't matter if it's good. You're not doing it for other people. You're doing it for you. And now that we live in a flat universe, it kind of makes sense. I'm not going to go into detail, but people have seen pretty strange things in the sky behave in odd ways. And I think that makes more sense now if you think of it as a projection that's put in place in the sky for us. And in each shift we go through, it looks like they have different programmers. They've made different choices in the program. I used to love to bicycle. I have some trouble with my hips at the moment, so yeah, bike riding's great. What's lovely about bike riding is that it's quiet. Don't you like that about bike riding? Yeah, I used to see satellites a lot, and now there's so much light pollution where I live, I'd have to go out in the middle of nowhere to see anything. And my son's probably watching. I forget who he watches. Anyway. My daughter's a biologist. She's a conservation biologist or a field biologist, whatever you want to call her. She does bioassessments and things like that to make sure that certain species and areas don't get destroyed when like PG&E or SMUD or other utilities have to do work. They try to make sure there's a good balance between the ecology and man's influence on it. And she's down in Southern California at Shaver Lake, and she posted a picture she says, "Oh, this is my office today," and it's just beautiful. And she's one of these people that's very sensory sensitive. She's one of these people that can't handle, although she does her rock concerts. It's like every once in a while she has to have a dose of a lot of people and noise. But she really enjoys the peace and quiet, and I think that's something that a lot of us have trouble finding. I don't have music going on in my house or TV going on. My house doesn't have noise. I don't like noise. And I know some people have a TV on, a radio on all the time. And I think that our brains just need a break from that sometimes, from the noise. Both the auditory noise and the mental noise. Oh, and that book talks about, which is really interesting, about these scientists that are trying to talk to the other side. And maybe we'll have a show on channelings, mediums, and technology that's trying to talk to the other side. Now, you have to understand, just because we talk about it doesn't mean that I'm a gung-ho believer or not. It just means I'm curious and I'm interested in the topic. And I'm open-minded. I'm not going to say someone who says they can talk to the dead and they appear to have a lot of information. Don't tell them they don't, that they're frauds. Although obviously there are a few out there that are. But I mean, I've had enough experiences. I know better. I know better. But we're not going to know a lot if we don't know about what other people believe and what other people do. And it helps us relate to each other and understand each other better because, we have people online here that are very religious. We have people that are very mystical. We have pagans and Wiccas and all, atheists. We have all kinds of people here. And, well, the skull experiment, I was thinking of that. And they had all this manifestations and everything. And I said, maybe they created the manifestations. I mean, I've read it and everything, and I've watched the thing, and it seems unlikely, but power of the mind is pretty amazing. And if I can manifest things from spirit to physical that I need, then they could manifest manifestations. I'm not saying they didn't have, and it's just as amazing, actually. The experiment's amazing, regardless of what was happening, because it's evidence that people have the ability to conjure up things. About Christians, and I have nothing against anybody's religion, but I mean, that almost, as far as I know, all the religions, I took a world religion class, I've taken, anthropology class on witchcraft and paganism and, that sort of thing. It was very interesting. That all of them believe this is not the home of our spirit. Whatever we are experiencing in this realm is not our home. The Buddhists don't believe it's our home. We keep coming back to fulfill our karmic cycle until we succeed. This is not our home. This is a place we visit to learn. So the whole idea that people are freaked out about strange things that happen here, I said, well, this isn't our home. This is for our experience, and we're, just run with it. Just realize this is just an experience. This is not a permanent. Hopefully, I mean, this world would not be my favorite thing to stay in forever. That's for sure. But I watched a video where the early Christians had him look like Apollo, young, curly-haired, cherubic face, big smiles, and that he had a wand when he did, like a staff about 2 feet, 3 feet long, that he used to cure, to the blind man to see, the crippled to walk. He used a wand like magic. And it's like our visions of Christ have changed over the centuries. And, it's very interesting. And I'm not afraid to investigate these sort of things because I'm not religious. I don't. If you want to be religious, that's fine, because that's a step in the right direction for a lot of people. It brings them comfort and guidance, and that's fine. But you should remember too that not everyone wants to be in that too, and that other people aren't bad because they don't want to be in your religion. So I think when you start having the us and them attitude is when our camaraderie breaks down. If we are in a flat universe, there is no outer space, right? I mean, they may be like out there, but not out there. It's like, We're in Flatland. Yeah, I have a lot of Scottish in me, Paul, and Irish, but a lot of Scottish too. And yeah, it's cultural appropriation, isn't it? Because the royals are Germans. And I found out recently I'm related to the Battenbergs. It's like I'm related to all those bastards out there. It's like, do you love me anyway? I'm probably the problem child of the family, so don't worry about it. I used to do Scottish country dancing, and I tell you, there was a man that was a McGregor. Now the McGregors are supposed to be the natural royals of the Scottish clans, and his tartan, his dress tartan, is very red, and he was like 6 foot something, and he was a big burly guy, and we had a Scottish country dancing ball here, and he comes in and he's wearing his full regalia. He must be wearing 50 pounds of buckles and things and cloth and sashes, and oh my goodness, you wanted to genuflect in front of the guy, Your Highness. I mean, he looked so grand. And I don't know, the man in the kilt and the pipes, I love it. It must be genetic, because I know some people, like my husband and others, cannot stand the pipes because he has no Scottish in him. So must be, oh well. Oh, there was, I'm debating whether or not to read this to you. We were talking about the skull experiment and how people can manifest things. In the UK, and well, all over that, UK and Ireland as well, pagans would entreaty their gods for help, but then some of them were not so nice people. They were conjuring dark stuff. And so I think this is where we find areas where the energy of the place is really bad, and that entities and dark things are seen there, and that mediums go there and say, this is something that's never been alive, not even from our earth, or it's from another parallel world, another dimension. Well, Paul says they play the bagpipes in Canada all over the place. The reason Scottish country dancing wasn't completely lost was because of the Scots that settled in Nova Scotia. They maintained the traditions, the music, the dancing, and when times got better, they helped to form the Royal Scottish Country Dancing Society. That's under the auspices of Queen Elizabeth. And without the Canadians, we would have lost that whole part of the culture, because, as you know, the English tried to eradicate all sense of self of the Welsh and the Scottish, and probably the Irish too. So it was no surprise when the American Revolution started, the first in line were the Irish and the Scottish to fight the English. And be careful who you make enemies of, because they're fierce fighters. But I love the pipes. I love the pipes. I'll be honest, it just makes my blood get all excited and thrills my soul. I love the pipes. And I know people just hate them. And it's like, well, anyway. So I'm thinking of reading this. Do you want me to read you something scary? Or not? I mean, are you in the mood for something scary? My mother's name was Allison, and they're not Highland, but then it goes quickly to Highland Scots after a few generations. And then I'm related to Robert the Bruce and McAlpin and all those dudes. Maria says, yes, You who watched V last night with QP, because QP had fallen asleep too early and she was up all night. Okay, let's see if I can read this. It's really small print. It's from a book called Wizards, a History by P.G. Maxwell-Stuart. And I'm going to use my phone light because it simply is too small a print not to have additional light on it. Okay. It talks about the real magician runs risks every time he works his craft. Let's see if I can put this in a place that makes it easier to read. This is why my books end up being a wreck. Frederick Hockley, 1808 to 1885, recorded an unnerving experience he had as a result of trying to comply with instructions given to him by a spirit. I had been looking in the crystal one evening for a long time without having a vision. Before I left off, I asked the spirit of the crystal very earnestly when I could have a vision, for it was so very wearisome to look and to participate and then be disappointed. The message immediately came. And the instructions are, procure a glass vessel a foot deep, flat inside, and 6 inches square. Fill it with water from a fish pond. Let the neck of the vessel be sufficiently large to admit your 3 fingers. Cut the middle finger of your left hand. Having put a strip of paper around the outside of the middle of the bottle, write with blood of the finger you have cut this one name. Apparently, he didn't put the name in there. Don't want to have anyone do it. Blood rituals are really dangerous. Paste this strip of paper around the bottle, then insert the turning page. Finger you have cut and 2 other fingers into the neck of the bottle, and from it into the water let drop of blood flow. If you do this, you will see and hear of that which will instruct you in spiritual knowledge and aid you in all that you desire pertaining to the world. Now, I would say that was a recipe for disaster. What do you think? Although I thought it could not be good, I did not desire anything evil, and I thought foolishly that I could hear and see and know what they said without allowing them to influence me. Or without for one moment surrendering myself to their possession. I would not do it again. It was not the power, but the knowledge that I sought. I was at a time in a house with a good many people in it, and fearing that someone might interrupt me, I locked the door. Yeah, I think if it requires blood, it's not a spiritual thing that's going on. It's more of a base, lower energy thing. Before I began, I think I'll just get back here. Before I began, I had been obliged to have a glass bottle made to the exact size, and I wrote the name on a vellum band and sealed it on. This I placed on the table, and very soon, without any call, I used nothing more than the name on the bottle. The water began to change to a thick, dirty red liquid, and from this there formed, as the water became clearer, a spirit, more like an animal than even a distorted human figure. It had a tail as long in proportion to its size as the tail of a mouse to the rest of the animal. It had peculiarly shaped horns. It increased in size so as to fill the entire bottle, the tips of the horns rising above the water in the neck of the bottle. When I saw its head coming above the water, I thought I should be able to prevent it getting larger by putting a stopper on the top. I could not find any. Can you imagine? He says, oh my goodness, I got to stop this. He looks for, he couldn't find anything to place over it but a book from the mantelpiece. The instant that I had stepped across for the book, the horns of the spirit were visible to me above the bottle. Very quickly, you may imagine, I was back with the book. I am very strong, as strong, I believe, as most men. I can lift a couple hundredweight, and now I had the occasion to put my strength forth. I tried to press the book on the neck of the bottle with all my might, but I could not move it 1 inch. My hands in the book and them went up as easily as if I could have lifted a baby's hands. I grew desperate. I tore the band off the bottle. I used exorcism. There was no fire in the room and no light, or I would have immediately burned the band. I could not tear it. I had no means of destroying it. The spirit at this time was gradually getting out of the bottle. Yeah, I think Pandora's box is a good description. I could not think what to do. I took the bottle up, threw it down, and broke it. The water, of course, ran all over the carpet, and I thought for a moment that I got rid of the spirit, but I was mistaken. For from the water, as it lay on the floor, it rose again, much larger than before. Like the Sorcerer's Apprentice, right? I went to the door, but as I was afraid to open it, then in an instant I thought he might be only visible to me and not to others, and that if I were with other people, he would disappear from me. And I tried the door, but it wouldn't open. I forgot I had locked it. I don't think this guy's a very good wizard. What do you think? Hi, Bubbles. Again, I used the form of dismissal and exorcism, but it was of no use. Having done this, I asked him what he wanted. He asked me to test his power by naming anything I desired and said if I found that he gave it to me and I would promise him obedience, he would do the same in all other things. He was asking him for his soul, basically. That, you promise to obey this demon thing and he'll give you what you want. I resolutely told him that I would not. The first smart thing he's done that evening. That I had known he was evil and could escape from the bottle, I would not have called him. Still, he did not leave, and that I felt the place to be insufferable, so oppressive, suffocating. My eyes seemed to burn. I was getting giddy, appeared to see instead of the one figure of 1,000 of shapes and sizes. I still remained with my hand on the lock. The room became confused and dark for 1 instant only, then all was light. The evil spirit was gone, and I noticed that every drop of water was gone from the surface of the carpet, and on that white ground which surrounded the pattern was a single red dot, probably the drop of blood. Although unnerved whilst the spirit was present, I was not the least so the moment it was gone. On stooping to pick up the small pieces of bottle, I observed round the red spot a circle containing words. Even then, by an impulse I could not control, I was all on fire to know what those words were. Down to my knees, I deciphered with much difficulty. And this thing he read, it says, returns blood, which is too white for sacrifice. Apparently this man was too good of a person for the demon to control. The red spot rose above the carpet, the words disappeared, and there only remained a little piece of cold, congealed blood. This I removed. In the adjoining room, I burnt the band, which had been around the bottle, threw away the pieces of the bottle, and determined to be more cautious in the future. Oh my goodness. You'd think that he would swear off trying to be a wizard, don't you think? I mean, most of us would just like, nope, not doing that again. People are very foolish. They really are. Anyway, Bubbles, we talked about the Windigo today and stuff like that. And I read from this Wizard's book, and I read from Richard Bullivant's Exploring Our Parallel Worlds, Part 2. I'll put the links to the books on the description. I'd like to hear from you guys what you think of what we discussed today. Did you learn anything new? Was it anything interesting to you? Because I want to make sure that I'm keeping your interest peaked, because this is an educational channel. I want to be educating not only myself, but other people as well. And if you have anything that you'd like to discuss next week, I'd love to hear any feedback from there. And you're all quiet. Yeah, I've had interesting things, visions and stuff when I meditate. You don't have to use shrooms to get into that kind of state of being able to see other things. You just need to be able to quiet your mind sufficiently and put yourself in a sacred, safe place while you do it. Any of you watch any of the past life regression videos at all, as we talked about last week? And you know the funny thing, I found a little piece of paper that had a phone number, and it said Tracy, and it said QHHT. And I found it in my stuff, and I'm trying to figure, I don't remember getting that. I didn't know what QHHT was either. You know, it's like, sometimes this world is just bizarre. Just bizarre. And as for MEs for this week, well, I know that one guy and I were talking about Satchel Liberty. Now she's stepping out. She has a foot that's lifted up in the back now with a sandal. It's a few shifts ago, but it's what I finally saw a picture of. And she looks pregnant again, and she's got boobage. And I think she's a yo-yo dieter, and we need to do an intervention for her or him or whatever they are. I know the torch changes shape and color. And, you know, because I remember when just her toes that were visible, now she has more. I don't know if the chain is still around her ankle either, or broken from her foot. It's supposed to be broken. Well, thank you all for coming. Keep thinking those good thoughts. Be good to yourself. Be good to everyone else as much as you can. Try to be patient with the non-affected. I know it's hard. Yeah. You know, she needs our help. She keeps on gaining and losing weight. You know. And I know there's always logo changes and stuff like that. So you all guys, take care and have a wonderful week until next week. And don't stay out of trouble. Bye-bye.